Hey there. It is August 4th. Pretty sure. Should have checked. I don't keep a calendar down here in the new digs down subterranean. Anyway, but I guess I'm going to start talking about that because this was a project that I begged off of many years ago. One of our first 50 songs. Those of you that remember back to 2009 when we launched Totally Guitars in April, at the end of April in 2009, we had 50 songs in the Target program, the subscription program, and that was one of them. Never Going Back Again by Lindsay Buckingham from the Fleetwood Mac album, Fleetwood Mac. Not to be confused with the first album called Fleetwood Mac that is now known as the original Fleetwood Mac. Anyway, never mind. But that was the album that followed Rumors in 1977, probably. Anyway, and the version that I did was kind of was the way a lot of people were teaching it back then because it was much easier to play than what Lindsay really did. Lindsay has huge hands and can play this stuff. So the way Lindsay originally did it was in drop D tuning, and at capoed at the 4th fret. And so anyway, I modified that for some students and I conferred with some other teachers on it. And we kind of came to the conclusion that doing it in a drop C tuning at capo at the 6th was a whole lot easier. Fast forward now, but although shortly after, a few years later, we started hearing live versions of him playing it, and he had a little solo in it. And some of my, I got requests, say, hey, could you show us the solo? I don't do solos a lot, especially if they're like pretty improvised ones. This was not too improvised. It was pretty well worked out. You just heard me play it. I'm not going to play it again, I guess. Although that little lick sounds so slack key. It's great. It reminds me of a lot of the Hawaiian tunes that we have up here. And every time, when I first heard Lindsay play that, I thought, that's just such a nice little... Beautiful. Anyway, fast forward. I got a lot to get through today, and I'm already taking up too much time. But the one of my students a couple months ago said, hey, maybe I could learn it the real way because it's more of a hassle to going into drop D tuning is pretty simple. Do it all the time. Going into the drop C tuning where you take the 6th string down to C and the 5th string down to G is a little bit more of a headache and a little harder, not harder, but it doesn't stay in tune that well when you tune the 6th string down to C, especially when you capo it. We got to retune it anyway. And so I decided to work with Dave on the way Lindsay really played it. Now, that makes, and boy, I really discovered some great tips and tricks to it that will make it more possible. But one thing I noticed that Lindsay never did in the live versions was he never got this run starting with this note up here. He always settled for that note later. And when I started working on playing it, I saw why. It's really difficult to get this stretch at a 3-string bar at the equivalent of the 6th fret, second from the capo, and then 2 notes at the 5th from there without getting into really weird hand position, but it can be done. And okay, but the end of that story is that has now been added to the lesson. So there are at least three new parts to the Never Going Back Again lesson that was one of our original 50, and now it's just one of our almost 1,800 acoustic lessons that we have now, and we add in the electric ones and the vocal ones, and it's well over 2,000. Anyway, so if anybody wants to mess around with Never Going Back Again the way Lindsay really plays it, it's up there now. I think that's all I'm going to talk about with drop D. Anything else I need to play in drop D before I go into standard tuning? Nah. The other new lesson this week, this was a blast to work on. I messed with that a couple of weeks ago and just decided it was time to do a lesson on it because I had a couple of students working on it. And so in the lesson on Go and Say Goodbye that just came out this week, just a few days ago, I think, also went into the the little rockier version that Poco did on their Good Feelin' No album. A little more power chords and that kind of stuff. And but some really nice harmony that Paul Cotton and Rusty Young did. And there's even a look at the way Richie Furay plays it acoustically, or did. That video was probably 10 or 15 years old already, but just a little Campfire version. So anyway, that's the new stuff. Let's see, what else did something really interesting came up yesterday. This is just way off the beaten path, and I was looking to see if we're going to a show to see a band. I'll tell you more about. I'll get to it in just a second. Many years ago, I saw there was a relatively local band, a Santa Cruz-based band, that put together a whole show that was the Beatles' White Album played in its entirety from top to bottom. There were 8 guys in the band, including local musician Tyran Porter here, who was in the Doobie Brothers, and then some other well-known Bay Area musicians. But Tyran was probably the most famous of the people in this band, called the White Album Ensemble, and they just did a spectacular job of everything in there. Now, of course, the Beatles never performed anything off the White Album live because they stopped performing in 1966, and that album came out 2 years later. But this band of 8 fabulous musicians managed to pull off everything that the Beatles couldn't do with modern technology and stuff in nowadays. The only thing they kind of fudged on, thankfully, was they did use bits of the recording of Revolution Number 9. There was really no point in reproducing that live on stage, and so they did anyway. But everything else was great. The acoustic tunes, opening up with the plane. See, nowadays you can even have the plane taking off or landing. I forget which it is for the beginning of back in the USSR. But now the reason I bring that up is I got a message a couple of days ago from Lawrence Juber, who I've done some things with and have stayed in touch with. I haven't talked to him in a few years, but he's part of an ensemble that is out, and they probably have done this a lot more. But they're doing 2 classic albums, top to bottom, Rubber Soul and Band on the Run. And so I've been listening to Band on the Run for the last couple of days to just kind of get more familiar with it. There were a few tunes on there I was barely familiar with. Of course, it had Band on the Run and Jet and Helen Wheels. There was another. Anyway, there were 4 or 5 that got a lot of airplay when this came out. 50 years ago, I think that's part of the deal, is that it's the 50th anniversary of Band on the Run, which came out in 1973, if I did my research right, if I remember. It was high school days for me. Anyway, so Lawrence let me know that they were playing in San Jose, and they're actually playing tonight in Danville and tomorrow night in Santa Cruz. So if anybody's local and would like to catch this, the last chance they can get, because I don't think they're doing any more shows, at least not according to Lawrence's schedule. But they'll be in Santa Cruz at the Cumbwa Saturday the 5th. That'll be the last. No, Sunday. Sorry, I'm going to the Saturday shows in San Jose, and so there's a Saturday show, 1 in the afternoon. I mean, a 2:30 show and a 7 o'clock show, and then a Sunday show in Santa Cruz. But I was already booked. We're already going to Santa Cruz to go to see Shakespeare in the Park on Sunday. So. Let's see. Is that all I want to talk about with LJ? One more interesting thing. Muriel sent me an interesting thing the other day too. She said, "Here, you gotta watch this video. It's Randy Bachman of Guess Who and Bachman Turner Overdrive, dissecting the mystery chord. This is the best way you can play it on the guitar, as a G7 sus4. But the combination of things that they did in the studio that made it sound okay." So all kinds of people, including Lawrence, have speculated and figured and really tried to dissect how they got that opening chord for A Hard Day's Night. And Randy Bachman is kind of a Beatles geek, and I'll see if I can track down that video, and because I'm sure it's on YouTube. I know I've seen it before. Okay. I think I'm off the Beatles kick for right now. Well, one more thing is going to come up when I talk about something else. I want to get to a couple of tips and answer some questions about that came up during our webinar a couple of weeks ago. I do want to remind the COA folks that next Saturday, that would be the 12th, we will be having the next Pathways webinar. So if you're a COA member and you didn't remember that, it's on the COA forum. Try to join us, noon Pacific time. But two other questions, or at least one that I didn't get to, I think I'm just going to go into one of them, was about hybrid picking. And like, is that a useful thing to do? So the reason that's why I've got this pick in my hand. It's really just the idea of using your pick and two fingers to do something similar to finger picking. Now, what I was doing right there was doing a finger picking pattern, the same one I would use in like Landslide. Let's make it a whole C, that major 7. But I did that with a pick in my hand. Now what that would do is it would let me kind of alternate back and forth between having a pick to strum stuff and doing some finger picking. Steve Howe plays clap like this. He plays it with a pick in his hand, which makes some of those really flashy licks much easier, more like electric technique that happen in clap. But then he does finger picking stuff. There we go. God, should have thought about this before I did. So that's how he plays that. In my lesson on clap, it doesn't go that way. I have it otherwise. But the advantages to doing this are it does let you switch back and forth. And I think the person that asked this, I think it was Mark, as a matter of fact, was maybe also asking about some good exercises for it. The main song that I have a lesson on up here that does have this in it, there might be more, but the main one that I use it for is the Sage, the Greg Lake piece, which I can't remember now. It's got some of that kind of stuff in there, but it's got some really, really fast kind of picking in it. But also, so let me get to some exercises. I'm rambling on about this. If you want to start working on this, start with something very simple. Play an A minor chord, and just work on hitting a bass note with the pick, and then using your middle and ring fingers to play the top two strings, and maybe alternate the bass. Or then separate those notes into like a triplet kind of feel. I'm just going thumb, up, thumb, pick, middle, ring on the top two strings. You could use it, you could play House of the Rising Sun like this, where you would use the pick for two notes. You can mix up the order of the notes, all that kind of stuff. So there's a couple of just good little exercises that could be, let's see, you can even play Blackbird like this. Oh, I should have thought about this. And what you would do is you would strum down on the middle strings instead of doing it the way I would do it finger picking wise, where I use my thumb, always going to get the third string as a second bass note. That's how I teach people to play Blackbird. But what Paul really did, I've talked about this before too, is had a little light tap on the strings with his fingernails. He does it with his index finger, but I do it with my middle. But you can work on that with the pick. I gotta decide which finger to use for that. I'm gonna go back to my second. Ooh, gotta watch out for that open D string. I had one more song I was going to... Oh, then you could even try a normal finger picking pattern like we'd have in Landslide, something like this. Now I've got my middle and ring fingers on the second and third strings, not playing the first. And so like the Landslide finger picking pattern would be pick on 5, middle finger on 3, pick on 4, and then ring finger on 2. So you're essentially doing finger picking. You're taking one finger out of the rotation, but it, you know, those are a couple of good songs that you might mess with to get the hang of hybrid picking. I had one more thing I was going to talk about. I'm going to save that for next week. It had to do with guitar geography. So maybe I'm going to get to it. The pack that we had on sale this week, the Guitar Geography pack, I've noticed a lot of people picked it up, and I hope you're having a good time. It'd be great to have some comments on that, and some, you know, so if anybody that's got it, I'd like to hear back on the forum what you think. If if you got something out of it, or if it was confusing in too many spots, or whatever. So feedback. And speaking of feedback, it'd be great if the questions and answers part of the forum started getting some action too, because I'm always looking for stuff to talk about on the Friday update, and it's really easy to talk about something if people have specific musical questions or questions about volleyball rules. Anyway, okay, I think I better just end it with something. Oh no, it's like I'm going to give you the geography thing. I'm going to give you one geography hint, because something that learning the notes on the 6th and 5th strings, it can be really easy. Like with just a little bit of work, you should be you could tell me, if I ask you where is C on both of those strings, you should be able to come up with it's on the 8th fret on one, on the 3rd fret on the other. And here's a way to get that. If you just worry about the natural notes on a block of frets, meaning we don't care about sharps or flats, but most of you probably know that the 3rd fret of the 6th string is G. Got that? Well, that means every other fret, the 5th is A and the 7th is B. So right here we've got these 3 important notes, G, A, and B. And on the same 3 frets, the alphabet, the scale just continues. G, A, B, C, D, E. So I've got 2 notes at the 3rd, the G and the C, 2 notes at the 5th, the A and the D, and 2 notes at the 7th, the B and the E. And, you know, keeping that in mind, I've got G, A, B here and C, D, E there, meaning the 5th string. So the G and the G, A, B set of 3 is on the 6th string, and the C, D, E set is on the 5th. So that covers 3rd to the 7th fret. That's a pretty good big area of the neck. And we only care about the bottom 2 strings. As this continues, we'll later on, in like future episodes, start talking about how you can use those notes to make sure to learn the notes, the higher notes up the neck as well too, understanding octaves and fifths and stuff like that. But, okay, last thing is the G and the A and the B that happen here. If I continue up to the 8th fret and think about the 8th, 10th, and 12th frets, the same layout. 3 white keys, 3 natural notes on all a step apart, 2 frets apart, except now we're at frets 8, 10, and 12. Down here we're at 3, 5, and 7. Well, that 8, 10, and 12 not only is the same as the 3, 5, 7 on the 5th string, it continues C, D, E, F, G, A. The same 3 frets on the 5th string just follow the same scale of natural notes. So I'm at the 8th fret. At the 8th I've got C, at the 10th I've got D, and at the 12th I have E, that is of course the octave of the open E. And then continuing to the 8th fret of the 5th string, I have F, G at 10, and A at 12. So another block of 5 frets, 8 to 12, where every other fret has one of the natural notes that just follow the alphabet, just starting on C. Down here I've got G, G, A, B, C, D, E. That same C, D, E is up here at 8. C, D, E, F, G, A. Okay, that way if you kind of just get a grip on that, it should be pretty easy to find any note. If I ask you where is F sharp, you should be able to say it's the 9th fret, because F is at the 8th, and there's the low F sharp down here. Okay. Let's end with a little messing around. Okay. See you next week.